We're going to look at two verses. We're going to compare two verses, okay? Genesis 1 and Isaiah 45. Genesis 1 and Isaiah 45. When you've got both those scriptures in your fingers, look at me so I'll know we're ready. Genesis 1 and Isaiah 45. Now look at Genesis 1 and verse number 2. And the earth was without form. Now this is clearly following Genesis 1:1 where he said he created the heaven and the earth. Then he describes the earth. And the earth was without form. The Hebrew word, the two words without form is one Hebrew word. It's the word tohu. Tohu. In English it's spelled just like it sounds. T-O-H-U-W. That's how it's spelled in English. Certainly not how it's spelled in Hebrew. But it's the word tohu. And the earth was without form, was without... Now, here's how we read it. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without tohu. So you do a casual reading, it looks like God made the world tohu. Does that make sense? If He made the earth, created the earth in verse 1, and verse 2 describes that created earth, He created the earth tohu. Does that make sense? Okay. Look at Isaiah 45, verse 18. Isaiah 45, verse 18. For thus saith the Lord that created the heavens, God Himself that formed the earth and made it, He established it. He created it not in vain. He formed it to be inhabited. I am the Lord, and there is none else. Now, look at the little phrase toward the end of the verse that says, He created it not in vain. The two words, in vain, is the one Hebrew word tohu. This is one of the best arguments for the gap theory I was ever confronted with. It took me about 4 or 5 days. The missionary that I discussed took me about 4 or 5 days to figure out the answer. In fact, he even called me on the phone. Have you come up with the answer? You know. It took me about 4 or 5 days. Here's what they say. Notice it says in Isaiah 45, 18, He created it not in vain. Therefore, it means He created it not tohu. Now, me and you believe, Genesis 1, verse 1, in the beginning God created the earth, and the earth was out form and void. So, according to Genesis 1, He created it tohu. But Isaiah 45 says He did not create it tohu. So now we got a dilemma. Did He create it tohu or did He not create it tohu? You see the argument. You see why somebody can use that and say, I believe in the gap theory. And I struggle with this in quite a while. Let me give you my arguments for this. Number one, let me say this. Very important you understand this. Number one, words can have different meanings. Did you know that? Words can have different meanings. This word tohu, Hebrew word tohu, listen to this. In your King James Bible, I'm going to read to you the ways this word has been translated, okay? The word tohu has been translated confusion. You don't have to write these down. This is just for argument's sake. Confusion, empty place, without form, nothing, naught, vain, vanity, waste, wilderness. 9 different ways, and some of these words do not mean the same thing. Confusion and wilderness, not the same thing. This word's got different meanings. English, we have words that have different meanings. This is my back. That's the back of the church. When I leave, I'll be back. That's 3 different definitions for the word back. So words can have different meanings. We need to understand that. So since words have many meanings, and by the way, I'm going to read some of my notes tonight. I want to make sure I don't miss anything, so please forgive me if I read a good bit. This word has many meanings and uses. So though the same word is used in Genesis 1:2 and Isaiah 45:18, it doesn't mean that they're used in the same way. And let me say this. Me and you, we believe in the King James Bible. I don't believe there's an error in the King James Bible. And if you want to debate that, we'll have another 6-hour discussion on that. There's not an error in this book. That's a perfect Word of God. Now, a lot of King James only individuals believe in the gap theory. A lot of them. A lot of King James only people believe in the gap theory. Let me tell you why you're going to have a real problem being King James only and believing in the gap theory. Because King James only people will use the tohu argument. They'll say tohu. It's not created tohu. So that means in Genesis 1 verse 2, it had to become tohu. Since he didn't create it that way, Isaiah 45 says he didn't create it tohu. That means it had to become tohu because of some great cataclysmic judgment, a flood. So it became tohu. Problem with that. Do you believe with me that the King James translators got the words right? Believe we got them right? Okay. Here's the problem. Without form and in vain do not mean the same thing. That should be obvious. Genesis 1:2, without form, he's talking about the shape of the planet. In Isaiah 45, he's clearly talking about not the shape of the planet, but the intent of the planet. Why he did what he did. He says he created not in vain, he formed it to be inhabited. The purpose of the planet is to hold people and animals. It's to be inhabited. In Genesis 1:2, he's talking about the shape of the planet. It's just a perfect sphere. There's no mountain ranges. There's no valleys. There's nothing. It's just shapeless. In Isaiah 45, he's talking about its purpose. Now, if you're going, I'm coming from a King James only. I don't have to use this to make my point. But just for us King James only people, if you want to tell me that tohu means the same thing in both texts, then one of these verses is wrong. Which one are you going to pick? King James only fella? Which one's wrong? Because without form and in vain do not mean the same thing. One of them is wrong. So which verse are you going to correct? Bible corrector? You can't have it both ways. You can't use the tohu argument and not correct one of the verses because they don't both mean the same thing. And that's my King James only argument. Let's get back to the technical argument, okay? A closer look at the verses clearly reveals that the word tohu is not used the same in both verses. In Genesis 1:2, tohu is clearly referring to the physical shape of the earth. It's without form. In Isaiah 45:18, it is referring to the purpose of the earth's existence, not its shape. Therefore, God did create it tohu, shapeless, but he did not create it tohu, purposeless. You understand? So the verse doesn't argue against us at all. It actually helps you to be a little more King James only, actually, in my humble opinion. Go to Jeremiah chapter 4. Jeremiah 4. This is